So we've been going through, as you know, these books, the two books, the Way of the Pilgrim and the Pilgrim Continues His Way. And I didn't realize we were on literally the last page because my book still has several pages, but they seem to be biographical notes, which we could look through maybe. I don't know. Let's see. Otherwise, I think if we get done too early, I'll go through some of the writings on attention in the Philokalia that I found to be rather interesting in my reading there. So they've been having this conversation here after they've left the enlightened guy, and they got to talking about what they've been learning, and the professor seems to be our antagonist, or at least saying things that the monk and the others disagree with. And we stopped before picking him up because I knew that we would have to read everybody's response in order to get to him. But it turns out we could have done that. Anyway, the professor in this situation, he says, your analysis and your proofs are admirable and exact, but it would be interesting to hear from you the actual method and form of prayer for others. For I think that if the fruitfulness and attractive power of prayer depend upon a living interest in our neighbors and conspicuously upon the constant influence of the spirit of him who preys upon the spirit of him who asks for prayer, such a state of soul might draw one away from the uninterrupted sense of the invisible presence of God and the outpouring of one's soul before God in one's own needs. All right. Did anybody understand that? Your analysis and your proofs, all right. It would be interesting to hear from you the actual method and form of prayer for others. Oh, so prayer for I see, prayer for others, not prayer for others. For I think that if the fruitfulness and attractive power of prayer depend upon a living interest in our neighbors, and conspicuously upon the constant influence of the spirit of him who preys upon the spirit of him who asks for prayer, such a state of soul might draw one away from the uninterrupted sense of the invisible presence of God and the outpouring of one's soul before God in one's own needs. Boy, that sounds like he's making up problems right there. Sounds like he's not getting it at all. And if one brings one's neighbor to mind just once or twice in the day with sympathy for him, asking for the help of God for him, and would that not be enough for the attracting and strengthening of his soul, to put it briefly? I should like to know exactly how to pray for others. All right. Interesting question. The monk. Prayer which is offered to God for anything whatever ought not and cannot take us away from the sense of the presence of God. For if it is an offering made to God, then of course it must be in his presence. So far as the method of prayer for others is concerned, it must be noted that the power of this sort of prayer consists in true Christian sympathy with one's neighbor, and that it has an influence upon his soul according to the extent of that sympathy. Therefore, when one happens to remember him, one's neighbor, or at the time appointed for doing so, it is well to bring a mental view of him into the presence of God, and to offer prayer in the following form. Most merciful God, thy will be done, which will have all men be saved and to come into the knowledge of the truth. Save and help thy servant N, whoever it might be. Take this desire of mine as a cry of love, which you have commanded. Commonly, you will repeat these words when your soul feels moved to do so, or you might tell your beads with this prayer. I have found from experience how beneficially such a prayer acts upon him for whom it is offered. You know, that's kind of an obvious thing that praying for somebody doesn't take your mind off of God, mostly because you're there with the divine as you're praying for this person. And also, you know, Vivekananda brings into light this notion that the highest form of worship is the service of God in others. So even your willingness to help that person is a form of worship to the divine presence within that person. So wishing well and serving others is not something that takes us away from the divine, especially if you're doing it, if you're worshiping the presence of the divine in that person through that service. If you see yourself as providing service to another, that does run into the danger of egoism, which does block you from the presence of God, does get in the way of seeing the divine. So this presence of God, is present everywhere. And this idea of praying for somebody, it is a good idea, as he's suggesting here, the monk is suggesting here, that you don't pray for particulars. You don't pray that they get their new car, or that they win the lottery, or this, that, or the other, because what we're praying, if it was answered, might hurt the person more than what was happening before you prayed for that particular, because we're not in a place of knowledge as to what is best for everyone. And so one of the things that I do when I am wanting to bring something positive to somebody is just to bring them into the presence, like he's mentioning here, to think of them in the presence of God, kind of offer them as a person to God, and just kind of work on your own faith that God has already and is already doing what's best for each and every person in the place that they are. And so you can pray that that person becomes aware of that, becomes aware of that divine love, becomes aware of that divine presence, and just place them in your heart before the beloved, which is good for you and for them, and also allows your faith to grow in the nature of being, the nature of this world, which is divine by essence, by nature. And because of that divinity, we know it's of the nature of love and of wisdom. And so praying for somebody is more bringing them before the divine as a friend, and just putting your attention on them, and expressing your desire for God to do the same. But at the same time, it's that kind of prayer is also a prayer for your own understanding and your own acceptance for what is. Because one of the things about that's most beneficial in facing the moment is non-resistance, taking exactly what the moment offers in the trust that it is what is perfect, it is what is best, and to try and move ourselves into a frame of mind that understands that all is as it should be, which doesn't mean we don't do anything. We respond to it from our nature. We don't react to it. To react to something can be to resist it, a form of resistance. So we don't take in what's happening and then react to it. We take in what's happening, and our nature of love, our nature of being, our nature of wisdom will then respond properly. If you get the calculating mind involved in it, then you're going to mix up the ego in the discussion, and the ego is going to distort what might be best in that situation. So we try to respond from our nature, which we don't have to do. That happens when we stop responding or reacting from mind or from our own sense of self. So those are helpful ways to pray, especially if you're praying for somebody else. But to pray for particulars isn't always wise, because we just don't know. We just don't know what's best for a person, and our prayer could be something that would damage them. So it's a lesson in surrender and a lesson in worship. That to want to serve somebody, whether it's in prayer or physically or any way, if it's done as an offering to the divine that's in that person, then it's helpful to you and to them. If you think that you have something that they need, that puts you in a place of advantage over them, and if that service goes on for a while, it's going to build resentment in them, and it's going to build pride in you. And so this is why Vivekananda said that all service that you do really only serves you. It only benefits you. And so perform it as worship. so that you alleviate that idea of you having and them being a have not, because there's a subtle imbalance there that places you over that person. And so try and surrender that, and and pray in that way, serve in that way. There's not a whole lot more to say about that. Professor, your views and arguments and the edifying conversation and illuminating thoughts which spring from them are such that I shall feel bound to keep them in my memory and to give you all the reverence and thanks for my grateful heart. All right, that professor, he's a character. The Pilgrim and the Professor, the time has come for us to go. Most heartily we ask for your prayers upon our journey and upon our companionship. The Starets, the God of peace that brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of that everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work to do his will, working in you that which is well pleasing in his sight, through Jesus Christ, to whom be the glory forever and ever. Amen. So he's blessing that. So that concludes that journey. Well, how would you summarize? How would you summarize that pilgrim's journey in all that we've read, just from thinking for a moment of where we've walked, what he's learned, what he's done? Grateful hearts everywhere. Yes. Anyone want to run at it? Oh, come on, certainly. Someone can form a sentence about how you were affected by this story of this young man. I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, look at the great qualities that he had. That's as important as anything. The fact that he read a scripture and spent a significant effort and portion of his life in trying to understand.
I have a comment.
Who does? Good.
What I liked most about this book was the complete and total earnestness of him, that seeker.
Yeah.
And I think if there's one lesson to take away from it for me is that sincerity can take you all the way to the end goal.
That's absolutely, yeah, that's a great observation, because it's totally true. I mean, he surrendered at every step.
Yeah.
To God. He accepted his troubles, he accepted his difficulties. He was never broken.
And he was so earnest.
Yeah.
He was so completely earnest. There was no, at least from what I understood from that his writings, there was no major conflict in his attempt to really get at the truth of all this. He didn't have a double agenda. It was just one track straight to that thing. And so regardless of what happened to him, he just persisted and persisted.
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, look at what he did. That whole journey was for one reason.
Yeah.
He wanted to find out what the scripture meant by how does one pray without ceasing? What is the meaning of that? Yeah. And he went from one person to another on a long journey, a long walk, and his renunciation along the way.
And also, at that time, he wanted to go to the Holy Land, right? And he got back, but he was so surrendered that even when all those obstacles came, he took it in a really positive, productive way and didn't lament the fact that he didn't get to go there. He continued his sadhana and just took it as a lesson and just moved forward. He didn't look back, no regret.
Right. The total confidence that yes, George. Hope you're muted, George. There you go.
Yes. Though I haven't been with this group until tonight, I have read this book, and what impressed me most about this the young man is that single-mindedness of his purpose to kind of echo what Greg was saying, single-mindedness. And throughout, it reminded me of a Orthodox bishop who I knew and was friends with many, many years ago. And he put out a series of tapes that I listened to often. One of which is that the concerning the prescription to pray constantly, he said that the best way to pray is to go inside and remember God. As simple as that.
Yes.
And that's what essentially I think this young man was doing through his searches and communications with the other people.
I think that's an excellent summary of it, because he, initially the prayer was, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And that was what he was told to pray continuously as a mantra, as a repeating prayer. But what you say is, George, is the maturity of that. That yes, saying that prayer is the means to coming to a place of a constant communion with your own isness, the presence of God within you, the I am, and coming to an awareness that it is impossible to be separate from the divine, that it's impossible to be forgotten by God, that your very presence is borrowed from the beloved. Your ability to see and give love is borrowed from the divine, and your wisdom is certainly a gift from the divine. And so if we come to know that as an assurance of the presence of this beloved within us, that state of communion is prayer. And you become aware that everything you say, that everything you do, that everything you think is prayer. When you grow in your awareness of the presence, you see God in others, and even your conversation with others is prayer. All of it becomes sacred. I mean, the touch of the presence will make your experience of being sacred and deep and meaningful, regardless of what you're doing, because it will be the how you're doing it that will be profound, that will be beautiful. That's
yeah.
Yes.
What I relate to with what you're saying is that this the bishop, to go within and remember God, is like reminding ourselves of that part of us that is God, that is divine, and that we get often lost the awareness of in our everyday world.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are things that you simply cannot do with the thought of the divine within, and certainly it helps a lot with our vices, to help us, because that will of the divine is also not separate from us. The will of God is our own will purified, our own will that's been removed, that's had me and mine removed from it. And so that conflict between the personal will and the divine will, you should always lose in that conflict, and having a distinct conscious memory or awareness of the presence will make that much simpler. And not only that, but that communion with God inside also causes a stillness within, a contentment within. The thought of love is a beautiful stiller of the mind. To put your awareness in your heart, in the shrine where the divine image resides, to place your awareness there is an amazing power for silence, for that stillness, for that full stillness within. Because in that stillness, what Ramakrishna says, this is something I've shared quite a bit lately, it's new for me, a new experience in the last couple of years, is, Ramakrishna says that which arises in silent mind is the voice of the beloved, is the voice of the divine. And so we're always wondering, how do we communicate with God? Why is prayer always one-sided? Well, prayer is one-sided when you've got a noisy mind, because you just keep balking and balking and balking, but you're never listening. Partially because you don't expect an answer. We've been raised and taught that prayer is you talking to God, and that the response is in things that happen, as it were. But when you are living in the presence, that silence, that contentment, that stillness of mind allows you to hear the voice that comes from before mind, that comes from before body. Makes you aware of your own divine nature, and that awareness allows you to hear. So when Thakur says, that which arises from silent mind is the voice of the beloved, you can use that in prayer. You can lay out before the Divine Mother, or God, as you see her or him or that. You can lay out your prayer, your question, your struggle, and then just sit in silence, putting your awareness on the heart, your awareness on the presence of God. And the scriptures assure us, for what it's worth, I assure you, that you will come to an answer. You'll get an answer. You'll get information sometimes that you didn't have before you went quiet, before you sat. And if God doesn't answer in that moment, you don't give up. When Mother was praying for Thakur's wellness, she went to the shrine of Simhavahini multiple times and just lay there until she got her answer. And so we see this earnestness in the disciple here in our pilgrim. He wanted his answer. He roamed the world for it. He talked to priest after priest, starets after starets, looking for the answer, and got it from all different directions, pieces of it everywhere. Read books, reading the Philokalia that he did. That was no small effort. The Philokalia is, a volume of at least 5 books that I know of. And so to have that kind of devotion, to want to ask a question and mean it, to ask a question and mean it, to really want a deep and satisfying answer. So many times we throw out a question, and if we get an answer, well, okay, that's cool. And even if we don't get an answer, it's like, oh, well, that's cool. We go on to the next thing. We don't worry too much, it wasn't a real question. So we're seeing in this pilgrim, just exactly like Greg said, that earnestness which runs deep in him. And we also see that surrender in him, in accepting all of the different circumstances that he went through. And again, that non-resistance that he had to all of those circumstances. He was willing to sleep under a tree, willing to sleep in a rich man's house, willing to walk in the rain, willing to lose what he lost and get what he got. There was just no requirement in him for the outside. So he had this wonderful virtue that all the traditions would applaud. We just fall in love, and this is why we get such a wonderful answer from him. That to pray always is just simply that, to be aware of the presence, just like George was saying, to be aware of the presence always, and in that communion, even though it's silent, it's pregnant with meaning and profundity, and you are informed by it. That's one thing I learned about Swami Prabhutananda over the years, is when I was living with him, because I was a surly little brahmachari, I was often discontent, thinking, oh, he doesn't care. He doesn't teach me anything. He never sits down and goes over a book with me. And I kind of felt slighted for a number of years because of that. And then when I took my final vows and I was asked to give my first lecture, just putting that lecture together and putting together all the lectures that I've done since then, revealed to me that he taught me so much just by the way he was, just by the way he lived. The fact that he had no forms of entertainment for himself, you know, that I never caught him just wasting time, that he was always either in his room or, you know, in his office or doing his exercise, or in meditation, you know, just there was no other thing there. He was what he was. He was a monk. And this is a beautiful thing that that to understand that silence, there's not really any such thing. Even though you go silent within, that inner world is always pregnant with an infinity of spontaneous available knowledge that it delivers, that comes to you without reference, spontaneously in the moment. So the silence that we're talking about inside is very much like the darkness of the night sky. You know, it's dark because there's no resistance. There's nothing to reflect the light. But actually, the night sky is lit by billions of suns, trillions of suns. And so that silence, just like the night sky is dark because nothing reflects, nothing resists the light, so also that silence in the mind comes when there's no ego resisting the light of the self, resisting that Satchitananda of your nature. And so when that comes out of the way, that stillness has the light of God, frankly, has the voice of God, has all of the answers, has all of the wisdom, has all of the love, has all the profundity of existence, and yet is experienced as peace, is experienced as silence, as stillness. And so this prayer that he was seeking, I think by the end he got it. I think by the end he knew. But I also think that he had a considerable amount of it already from the beginning, just because of the way he went, the way he walked, the way he looked for his answers, the way he looked for his, the way he accepted the answers when they came and dug even deeper into them. So, and there's probably something to that also. You know, that praying without ceasing is something that we're all doing constantly, but we're not aware of it as prayer. You know, if every thought that you have, every deed that you commit, you know, every word that you say, it is in fact a prayer. It is a fact of statement of intention and desire, of longing and want, and to become aware that it's prayer will itself purify it, make it sacred, and that knowledge or that awareness itself will mature your words, will mature your thoughts, so that they're not wasted, so that they're not trite, they're not just noise and entertainment. You know, that's why the great swamis, they're very silent. You know, they'll be sitting at the dinner table and everybody will be talking about ball scores and whatnot, and they'll just be sitting there content, not saying anything. You know, not unhappy, not discontent in the conversation at all, but just watching the divine play, observing the presence of God in all the people around them. You know, so they see it that way, they understand it that way. That's kind of what I saw anyway in this book and in his life. I compare him quite a bit. I can't help but compare him quite a bit with Brother Lawrence in the practice of the presence, because Brother Lawrence also came to the same conclusion, that the presence of God and being aware of it was prayer for him and a communion with him, and was the only thing he found necessary for turning all of his self-hatred that he started out with, all of his self-judgment that he started out with, thinking that he was going to hell, and thinking that any impetus that he had for God was an action of ego, that he just wanted the name and fame of it. He started with all those ideas, Brother Lawrence did. And then just through the practice of being with God and following that one simple rule that he had, he said, if I found that I was not doing something that I should be doing for the beloved, I immediately started doing it. And if I found that I was doing something that I shouldn't be doing for the beloved, I immediately stopped doing it when I became aware. And then he says something very important. I didn't give it much thought, not much thought. He didn't chastise himself about it. He didn't get caught up in, oh God, I'm so terrible, and oh, I'm always doing the wrong thing, and oh, this, that, and the other. He just said, I just changed it in the moment and kept going. And so, and we see that he became a saint from this same practice, just always being aware of the presence, that divine presence is what you are. It's why you have a presence at all. And to pray without ceasing is to remember that, to know that, and then allow that to live within you. To allow yourself to be motivated by the presence of God in you, by the voice of the divine that comes through that silence. And so that silence becomes the lack of ego, is signified by the lack of ego. And that lack of ego is the same as surrender. It's giving up your independence, your separation from the whole, which is true from the beginning. But it's something we unfold and something that we discover. It's not something that we create in it. So, how does that sound? I'm going to read from the Philokalia here. This is a writings from the Philokalia on prayer of the heart. And we might have gone over this before, but I think that it summarizes very nicely kind of what we've been talking about and the importance of presence, or the importance of attention, this awareness inside. And I just took off my glasses to see you, and now I can't see the book. So he uses the word attention instead of the word awareness of this presence. But he's saying that this attention is a sign of sincere repentance. Now, repentance is the ability to take a 180-degree turn from wrong action or wrong thinking. And so it's when you recognize that that's exactly what Brother Lawrence was talking about when he said, if I was doing something I shouldn't, I stopped. And if I wasn't doing something I should, I started. That's repentance. And this attention is a sign of sincere repentance, because you can't go in the wrong direction in the presence of God. You simply can't do it. It's like and if you can do it, well, in time you won't be able to do it as your understanding of the presence grows. When you're in the presence of someone who loves you utterly, you don't do things that harm them, or things that break that relationship. That's not the effect of love. And awareness and love are one and the same, because it's the awareness of the divine, which is love. And so that awareness and love are the same in you. And so it's impossible to insult that relationship, or to break that relationship when you're in the presence. And so for you to this constant presence means when something is trying to drag you away, some longing for pleasure, or some longing for escape, or some longing for any of the vices that we get involved in. If you turn to the mantra, if you turn to the prayer at that moment, that's a sign of your sincerity, of wanting to overcome that wrong action or wrong thought of your own. And so just choosing to remember the presence in the moment, he's saying, is a sign of wanting God. It's a sign of longing for the truth and for the divine. So attention is a sign of sincere repentance. Attention is the appeal of the soul to itself. And I'm not sure that he means exactly what I think he means there, because that's a very Vedantic perspective. That spiritual life is an appeal of your soul for itself, because itself is God. The soul is an individuation of a unified soul. In one essence, that awareness in all of us is a singularity. It is all God. And so our individuated soul, the soul that is created by our sense of separation from that universal, from that whole, that embodied soul, as it were, is a cry. Our mental construct in that state is a cry for unity, which is a cry for pure love. It's a cry for pure acceptance, so that we can be ourselves without judgment, without fear, without condemnation, without shame. It's a longing for forgiveness. The forgiveness of what? The karma that we hold in our own mind, that we hold against ourselves or for ourselves. Either way, it's damaging. And so this awareness and this commitment to awareness in ourselves is that. It's an appeal for yourself, for light, for your own true being, for your own true nature. So it's an appeal of the soul to itself, and a hatred of the world. Now that hatred of the world, that's always a sensitive one, because it sounds like to hate anything would be wrong. But what he's saying when he's referring to the world, he's referring to those things that are not of our divinity. Well, there's nothing not of our divinity, but it's the things that cause shadow. It's the things that cause wrong understanding in ourself. Ramakrishna says that in this world, there's vidya and avidya. There's light and there's darkness. And, and that means like light of knowledge, light of the presence. And darkness means things that make us forget the presence. And so this commitment to the presence of God within is a commitment to the presence of light within, and an avoidance or a hatred, an absolute renunciation of anything that causes that shadow, that causes us forgetfulness. If there's something in your habits or in your thinking that causes you to forget God, to forget the presence, to stop the prayer, you have an intense reaction toward that, an intense absolute renunciation. That's what Ramakrishna says. He says, what is needed is a singular, absolute, strong renunciation for the things that take you away from the beloved, that take you away from your ideal. And so this constant commitment to your mantra, this constant commitment to the remembrance of God, is what is meant by that hatred of the world as such. Not the world as an objective thing, but the world as a worldliness, things that draw us into the concrete, draw us into the world of matter, of separation from God. And an ascent toward God. It moves you in that direction. Because we've talked about the power of awareness. It's, that the knots of Maya, the knots of our confusion, the knots of our ignorance are untied of their own accord when placed in the light of awareness, according to Swami Prabhupada. So if you face any of your troubles with an awareness of the presence of God in you, the knots, the confusion comes untied in and of themselves. That's why I say that wherever you go, take this presence, take God with you. If you determine that you're going to do something you shouldn't be doing, don't forget God and do it, because that will cause you to forget God, first of all, and then to go deeper into darkness. But if you're going to do it, if you're just adamant inside, or you've just given yourself over, or you've just lost the fight and you just can't resist anymore, still don't forget God. Take God into the vice. That's what Ramakrishna told Girish Ghosh. When Girish Ghosh was an alcoholic, and this is my favorite thing. I always say it's my favorite thing. But again, just to say it, that Girish Thakur never told Girish Ghosh to stop drinking, because every alcoholic knows he needs to stop drinking. He may or may not be facing it. But what Ramakrishna told him, he said, every time you're about to take your first sip of that glass of wine, offer it to the mother. Thank her for the bliss you think that you get from it. And that instruction alone turned Girish into a saint, because the presence of God is that light of awareness, which will make all of your delusions untie themselves in its light. You don't have to do anything else except bring that awareness into yourself. Attention is the renunciation of wrongdoing and the acquisition of virtue, because that attention keeps you in the light, and it will make you see what you're doing. It will force you to face the absurdity of your actions that are not motivated by your nature, by demonstrating to you that they're not of your nature. We don't do good things for God. We don't behave because God is watching. We don't love our neighbors. We love ourselves in order to earn points. We do these things. Virtue grows because it is what you are. It is your nature. Pay attention and you see this. Paying attention means be aware of the presence. You begin to see that loving, the soul rejoices in that. It makes you feel wonderful. Forgiving makes for a wonderful life. Service of others, of the divine in others, gives a wonderful sense of satisfaction in life. And these are all things that you can do regardless of the insipid nature of the rest of your life. You can work in a cubicle in an accounting office for all your life, and if without that divine presence or that divine isness within you, that can be a horrible existence. And you could think, oh God, I dreamed of being all of this when I was young, and now I'm just walking around a bunch of cubicle mazes with my life. What have I done? That happens with a worldly mind. But with a mind that's constantly in the presence of the beloved, you're not at work to be an accountant. You're at work to love, because that's your nature. Incidentally, you're an accountant. Incidentally, you have a job. But you're the one in the office that's always checking up on folks, making sure that Mary's kid is getting better, or that John's grandmother's out of the hospital, or writing a card to somebody that's not feeling well. That's who you are. We're not accountants. We're not garbage men. We're not anything. We are love itself. We are wisdom itself. And at our job, that's our primary job, is to manifest that. And if you do that, you'll be deeply contented, regardless of what your job is. Front counter of McDonald's or the CEO of something else. Satisfaction in life comes by living according to your nature, the nature of love, the nature of wisdom, and expressing it just through being, spontaneously. Attention is the renunciation of wrongdoing and the acquisition of virtue. Attention is an undoubting certainty of the forgiveness of sins. It's an absolute certainty of the unconditioned nature of that divine presence that is you. So you are able then to let go, just like Brother Lawrence did in the moment. You're able to let go of things that are pulling on you, that are holding you down. You can't sit comfortably in the presence of God if you insist on bringing your history of wrongdoing into the room every time. How many times do you think you have to say you're sorry to the divine? A single time. That's it. A single time. I'm sorry. And you go forward with the intention of not doing it again. And if you do it again, you've already forgotten the previous time. So it's not like God is saying, oh, wait, this is the third time you've asked the forgiveness for the same thing, because he's forgiven you, which means he has completely wiped it every time you've gone. So he doesn't accumulate this. How do you know that? Because of that verse I shared yesterday in class, that 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 8, 4 through 8. Love keeps no record of wrongs. That's the business of ego. That's the business of mind. It keeps record of wrongs. And so it's this knowledge of grace, this knowledge of the forgiveness, of the nature of love, that allows you just to get up, dust yourself off, and do better over and over and over and over again in the company of the divine. It doesn't affect that love. God is not affected by that. He sees it, but he sees in you the perfection already. He sees what you are, not what you think you are. So this attention, this knowledge of God, this constant abiding in the presence is an undoubting certainty of the forgiveness of sins. Attention is the beginning of contemplation, right? It's that awareness of the divine that causes a stillness. When you would walk into the, I've seen Swami Prabhupada walk into a room of 20 men talking about scores on the Super Bowl. A normal person could not ever get the attention of a group like that. But Swami would walk in and that room would go still because of his presence. That stillness is the contemplation he's talking about here. That you bring that presence of absolute love into your awareness, and the rest of the mind turns to it and is like, oh, what a wonderful experience. What a marvelous presence. And it's quiet. It just enjoys that presence. So attention is the beginning of contemplation, or rather its necessary condition. For through attention, God comes close and reveals himself to the mind. That's what we're talking about in that silence. That which arises in pure mind is the voice of the beloved. You see, God reveals himself to the mind that is aware of the presence. So it brings about that calmness itself. And in that calmness, God reveals himself to the mind. You become spontaneously educated without having to learn, because it's coming from what is. It's coming from the isness of your nature and not from the pretend, delusion, the pretend diluted nature of ego. So it's spontaneous and it's effortless because it's what you are. It's not what you're becoming. It's what you are. It looks like we're becoming something because we're dropping off those things that were not natural and not in harmony with our nature. And that makes it look like we're becoming something. But in actuality, we're unbecoming something. We're doing away with the hypnotization that ego has caused in us. We're being dehypnotized so that which is truly ourself begins to truly manifest. So through attention, God comes close and reveals himself to the mind. Attention is serenity of the mind, or rather, it's standing firmly planted and not wandering through the gift of God's mercy, right? Because the thing that causes the mind to wander is its fascination with me and mine. Me and mine is the nature of ego. It's localized, it's small, and it's identified with a body and with a particular mind. And so it's constantly wandering, thinking of things that need to be done, thinks of things that need to be undone. What's the effect of this word going to be? How do I look better? And, what can I do with my hair? All of these things that the mind wanders about, all of the waves of mind are caused by the two fingers that you put into it, called me and mine, that make it confused. And so it's constantly trying to find its balance again, but it can't find that balance without attention. And to have that attention, you have to renounce the idea of me and mine from the equation. Attention means cutting off thoughts. It is the abode of the remembrance of God and the treasure house of the power to endure all that may come. Right? So it's the practice of non-resistance. It's through that knowledge that the nature of everything happening to you is love, and the acceptance of it, that even if it's pain, it will take you higher. Even if it's suffering, it will make you stronger, and so that you never lament the moment. You always turn to the Lord in faith and know that this is as it should be, and you accept it. And the cutting off of thoughts, the thought waves, again, caused by me and mine. So attention means cutting them off, not letting them arise, and you cut them off by withdrawing your identity with them. When thoughts arise, don't see them as your own. That's what egoism does. See them simply as they are. This is a thought. It belongs to nobody. It's arising in mind. It comes into being, and it goes back to emptiness, untouched. So you let it come, you let it go, you let it exist, let it go. That's cutting off of thought. To invite thought in is to identify with it, to be interested in it. If a thought arises in the mind and you have an interest in it, you've associated with it. If you place your eye to it, that's my thought, that's my desire, that's my idea. That empowers that thought, that gives it energy, that gives it actually a sense of existence. And then it gathers other memories and drags up some scars from the mind and becomes a state of being, separate from the attention of the present, the awareness of God within. Attention means cutting off thoughts. It is the abode of the remembrance of God and the treasure house of the power to endure all that may come. Because God is that power to endure, and faith in that nature is the reason that we endure. Therefore, attention is the origin of faith. When you become aware of this presence, and that presence grows, it's when you're saying the mantra, that in the beginning, it's difficult. In the beginning, it seems like work, and then it catches its own fire inside, and it becomes something that begins to happen quite naturally. And after it begins happening quite naturally, and every time you've been saying it, you've been trying to pay more attention to it and trying to understand the truth of it more deeply, and trying to allow the presence of the divine to be indicated by the name in the mantra. That as that grows and as that takes root within you, it becomes the dominant part of you. And faith, it says, it's the origin of faith, it's the origin of hope, and it's the origin of love. Right? So your mantra is all of those, because they contain the name of the beloved, and the beloved is the source of all love, all faith, and all hope. And when that presence within, the saints say, Vivekananda shares his experience about that in time, this inner awareness becomes more real than the world of the senses, than the world outside. That's the Thakur's statement. I think we shared it this morning also, when Vivekananda went to him and asked him, "Have you seen God?" And Ramakrishna says, "Yes, I have seen God, and I see him now more clearly than I see you." Right? Because he understands that the reality within is greater than the pretended reality of the external, the misunderstanding of the vision that caused, that creates the external world. And so God is more real than the things that happen, than the things that change. Therefore, attention is the origin of faith, hope, and love, since he who has no faith cannot bear all of the afflictions coming from without, because he doesn't know their nature. He could take the idea, oh my gosh, these things are destroying me. He's identified with ego, so things that hurt the body. This is against me, this is harming me. Instead of realizing, no, it hurts the body perhaps, perhaps harms the body, but if but for you, the self, it doesn't. It doesn't have anything to do with you, actually. You're able to withdraw completely from the body if you want to. When Swami Trigunatita went to the dentist, and the dentist wanted to give him the painkiller for extracting his tooth, and Swami Trigunatita says, no, that's not necessary. And the dentist says, how's that possible? He says, I just withdraw my mind from my tooth, and you can take it out. And so he did. He had his dental appointment, and the dentist went in there and did that work with no anesthesia, because he had developed the ability to withdraw himself from mind, because through his practice, he had come to understand the truth of the fact that he is not the mind, that he is not the body. And so you can, even a body in pain, you can withdraw your attention from that. Watch a teenager who's watching cartoons on television, and his mother comes in and tells him to mow the yard, and he doesn't move. And she comes in again. Where are you going to mow the yard? He doesn't say anything. Listen to me when I'm talking to you. And finally, he's like, oh, and turns around and looks at her. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. How can you not hear me? I'm standing right here telling you to mow the yard. That's a perfect demonstration of your ability to withdraw yourself from mind, to withdraw yourself from body, that it's there. So since he who has no faith cannot bear all of the afflictions coming from without, and he who does not suffer them willingly cannot say, God is my refuge and my fortress, because you're not taking refuge. Is Priya up to chat room mischief? She must be. So you're up there giggling away. He is my refuge and my fortress. If you can't bear all of your afflictions, if you can't accept without resistance what is, then he's saying, then you do not know the divine as your refuge, because the divine will show you that all is for your best, that all is to your advantage. He is my refuge and my fortress, and he who has not the Almighty as his refuge cannot be truly sincere in his love for him, because there's not trust. There's not trust, there's not surrender. If you do not take your mantra, your inner prayer, your inner space, if you do not take that for refuge, then there isn't real love there. All right, so that's the major paragraph he's got ongoing there, and it's 8 o'clock. Let me turn off recording.